Hi, this is Randy Henkin. Welcome to the Blue Frontiers podcast about seasteading and soon-to-be-created sea zones. People can do almost everything better. That's why Blue Frontiers will create sustainable, peaceful seasteads based on voluntary cooperation and deploy them around the world to help communities adapt to sea level change. This is the founder series of our podcast, and it's a great pleasure that I have this guest spot to introduce my friend and colleague, Joe Quirk. Joe and I have worked together for more than 6 years at the Seasteading Institute, and together, along with Mark, Nick, and Igor, founded Blue Frontiers. Joe deserves credit for taking note of the many aspects of the seasteading puzzle and weaving together a coherent, compelling, and visionary narrative of how seasteading will advance humanity and support the environment of our blue planet. With great care and sophistication, Joe has conducted a wealth of interviews and research across disciplines and has become an oracle of the seasteading movement. Now here's your host, the seavangelist, Natalie Meza Garcia.
Today, I have the huge pleasure of having seavangelist Joe Quirk, now co-founder and managing director of Blue Frontiers, but also president of the Seasteading Institute and author of the book Seasteading: How Floating Nations Will Restore the Environment, Enrich the Poor, Cure the Sick, and Liberate Humanity from Politicians. As a seavangelist, Joe's job is to take the message of seasteading to every corner of the world. He's done hundreds of videos, interviews, talks, and podcasts about seasteading in the last years. This is why for this episode, we decided to have more of a relaxed chat between two evangelists. I hope you enjoyed this long episode brought to you especially by Blue Frontiers, and thanks to the love to seasteading that both Joe and I share.
I feel completely relaxed and non-pressured to talk to you.
Okay, I like that a lot. Yeah.
I'm talking to a kindred spirit, and I could see, I knew that before we met. I read your papers and I watched your videos, and I realized we had very similar philosophies from the ground up and through all the details. And at the same time, you're such a different person from me. So very different people who arrived at very similar ideas, and I immediately knew you would be a big part of this just from your videos and your papers.
Wow, well, that is really, really nice to say, Joe. And I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you, actually. So
really?
Thank you. Yeah, of course. Don't you remember? No. So we were walking in Tetiaroa. We were walking in Tetiaroa, going from one moto to the other moto, and we were just chatting, and the water reached our knees, and around us there was nothing but water. And you just said, I know, seavangelist.
Oh, sure, I remember that.
Yeah, I remember it very well. So I'm here because of you, so thank you very, very, very much for that.
Oh, thank you. I'm very grateful you're a part of this.
No, I'm more grateful that you made me part of it. And I want to introduce you as the guest of our podcast, the Blue Frontiers podcast. Thank you very much, Joe, for being here. So for those who don't know, I'm here right now with Joe Quirk, evangelist of the Seasteading Institute and also president of the Seasteading Institute and co-founder and managing director of Blue Frontiers. And Joe is one of the nicest men that you'll ever meet, and also he's written one of the most interesting and eye-opening books that someone can get their hands on. So, Joe, thank you very much and for everything and for being here. And how are you?
I'm great. I've been looking forward to this all week. So it's a pleasure to be here.
I'm glad. I'm sorry for the delay. So, Joe, let's just have a relaxed chat. But I want to ask you, how has your experience as evangelist of the Seasteading Institute been?
It's been like a rocket taking off, to be honest with you, because probably about 6 years ago, I grokked this idea, as they say. I realized we could have variation in selection in governance itself. We could unleash decentralized societies and discover better solutions. And it wasn't an idea, It was a technology, and it could come very soon. And then I panicked. This needs to happen by, it's something that was set up to happen in 2050, and we don't have time. It needs to happen by 2020. And I was literally thinking this in 2011, 2012. And I'm an author, so I threw myself at the Seasteading Institute and Patri Friedman saying, you gotta let me write a mainstream book about this. So literally what I pitched was 1,000 times more people need to hear about this. They need to understand why it's important.
Yes, and they have.
Because the way this is going to happen is in all the brains of brilliant people like you, for instance, who haven't heard about it yet. Right? So I pitched it hard. And then they kind of deputized me to write the book.
Which now you have behind you. I can see it.
Yes. It is. I'm very proud of this.
Yeah, you should be. It's a freaking amazing book. I have it here. So this is actually not my version. I have two versions at home, but I'm not home. This is the book of one of the architects of Blue 21, who are also part of Blue Frontiers, and they are designing the floating island project.
So anyone that saw me just pull this book away saw this in the background. So I'm going to get kind of provocative here. I really thought in 2012 that either this is going to happen or we're going backwards to this.
And what is that for those who are just listening to us? That's another book on?
This is a very heartbreaking book called Mouse by Art Spinkelman. And it's him telling the story of his grandfather who survived concentration camps in cartoon form. Right? So it represents, a few decades before Germany, one of the most civilized societies in the world, descended into this madness. They had a flourishing Europe. They had a peaceful place. In World War I, they couldn't even get soldiers to fire at each other. They would intentionally fire over each other's heads. But the rise of monopoly nation states and big banks paid for this gigantic war that nearly destroyed civilization. And I feel like this is a cycle. And we go back I don't want to get too much into the details of this, but I really think it's a desperate situation that we're on an exponential trend with information technologies.
Yes, we are.
Rules and governance is a form of information technology. It's the most important one, and it's the one that is not improving because people can't experiment in a decentralized market.
That is true.
I thought that was just not a solvable problem until I was introduced to seasteading, right? And I realized this is a practical, realistic way of doing it because I'd already been on cruise ships and I understand the technology a little bit. So once I scored, yes, they're going to let me write the book with Patri Friedman, I panicked again.
No.
Because I write populist books. I write books that are fun to read. And I said, I can't write a good book about abstractions. I can't write a book that millions of people are going to read about ideas. There are I read books about ideas, but they don't reach lots of people. And it wasn't until I went to the 2012 Seasteading Institute conference and I met all the people that I would later call aquapreneurs, who were actually already attracted to seasteading in the early days, bringing their solutions. That's when it hit me that this is not about an idea, this is about people that are actually making it happen.
I see.
So I said, as a writer, I just have to step back and let them tell their stories in this book.
So that's why in each of the chapters you tell the story of someone who's living on a cruise ship for years, someone who's working on algae farms.
Yes. So Ricardo Radulovich and Neil Sims and all these people are coming to seasteading saying we could do this, we could do that. And I'm like, their story is the one that needs to be told. So you asked me how I'm doing, where 5 or 6 years ago I felt like we desperately need to make this happen by reaching more smart people. And here we are now, where we have tens of thousands more people involved in every area you'd need to build a new floating society. and all we need is like the business model and the legal sea zone, and we're ready to go.
Yeah, that is true.
Though my co-founders are struggling with all the details, but the big picture is this is a very exciting time for me. It's very gratifying. So that's how I answer your question.
Wow. I thought you had written your book to convince your wife to move at the seastead. Like you wrote a book on biology to convince her to marry you. Am I tying up notes that don't exist?
Well, the only thing I love more than seasteading is my wife.
Okay.
My wife has a business here. My wife has her dogs here, and by here I mean the Bay Area, California. She has a beautiful house she's got all set up. It's a beautiful Victorian. We have a beautiful garden she just completed. So she has built all by herself, basically, her own business, her own house, and her own garden. So how would I convince her to move to a seastead? I'd have to make the seastead more compelling than what she's already created here. But honestly, if I was single, I think I'd move to the Floating Island Project, but I'm less interested in creating a seastead for myself than I am in unleashing the innovation out there.
In sharing the message, in spreading the word, which is what you've been doing. You've just this last month, you've been to Brazil, Korea, you've been in the Bay Area. You've been to a lot of events. What has surprised you the most in traveling to all these places? Yes.
What has surprised me the most is the diversity of different cultures who all respond to this idea in a different way, and how rapidly and suddenly my interviews and public appearances have gone from hostile to enthusiastic. It happened within months. So the first couple of years I was involved, invariably you're just getting beat up. You know, you're appearing on the radio to get yelled at. And then it just immediately switched. At least in the English-speaking world, it's all been very positive.
In great part, thanks to your evangelism, Joe.
Thank you. Thank you. And we're gonna keep it going.
You're gonna keep it going? Yes. Oh. So, you've been to Tahiti a few times now, which is where the Floating Island project is being planned at this moment to be located. What has surprised you the most about Tahiti and French Polynesia?
Well, Tahiti has been nothing but surprises for me. So, I grew up in New Jersey. I didn't know that places like Tahiti were possible. I didn't know waters could be that turquoise. I didn't know there were sharks that didn't bite. I didn't know people could be that. I didn't know hospitality could be taken to an art form like that. I didn't know weather could be that good. So it's interesting. There's this legend of paradise that a lot of us Westerners have in our minds, which is this beautiful place with palm trees and grass skirts. And it was amazing to me to discover that it exists. And of course, it's based on a real place.
Yes.
So it really is the most beautiful place on earth. So that alone was surprising. But when Mark Collins first reached out to us, it sort of pitched French Polynesia as the ideal place for us to get started. It seemed too good to be true.
Yes.
And I thought he was overselling it.
Okay.
It was like too much. It's like the culture is already switching among islands. We have deep waters next to shallow waters. We have natural wave breakers. We don't have tsunamis. It's perfectly warm. We don't have high waves. We control an area of ocean the size of Western Europe, and 1/1000th of it is land. And it's like, how could we not know about this? Because we had gotten we had gotten scholars to basically research the various areas where we could start. And we didn't notice French Polynesia because we just thought it was France. So we didn't investigate. And then so our team of 10 kind of flew in there, and I found out Mark Collins was underselling it, and it was more amazing than I realized. And it was the first place I ever went where when I ran around and explained what seasteading was, whether I was talking to a politician or a little kid, they instantly got it. They would instantly be like, yeah, water, floating, islands, sea level rise, autonomy, switching, choice. Okay, we get it. Sounds interesting. When do we start?
Well, actually, the Senator of the U.S., Jay Kalani English, looked back in the history of Polynesian culture, of the whole Polynesian Triangle, and he found that there is even a word for floating islands in the cosmology of Polynesians, and it's called the Moku Lana.
Yeah.
Moku Lana.
Is it Moku Lana?
So I have confusion because I wrote the word wrongly for like 3 months. I was between Motulana and Mokulana. It's Mokulana, yeah, Mokulana.
Yeah, hey, so you think you're an expert on something, and then you go to a place where you find out they've been doing it for thousands of years and they already know much more about it. So when Jay Kalani English gave his speech, it was another one of these moments where like, this is too good to be true. This can't be true. So I was immediately on the internet looking up Moku Lana, and it turns out I found a children's book about a Hawaiian man that is a floating island portrayed as more prosperous and peaceful and a place you want to achieve and get to. It's just incredible.
Like a seastead.
Like a seastead.
A place that is more peaceful, more beautiful, where you want to be. Because it's, and you made this comparison, or you explained this very well in your book, how are seasteads going to be more peaceful in relation to land-based nations and the type of nation states that we have nowadays? How? For those who are not familiarized with your book, can you go a bit deep into how is it that having floating, semi-autonomous or autonomous human settlements can lead to more peaceful human societies?
So I would start with the question, well, why do our land governments, why do they tend towards war, violence, confiscation, debt, bankruptcy, and eventual collapse? Why aren't they as peaceful as, Starbucks or all the other services we want in the world? And I had never properly identified the true problem until Patri Friedman introduced me to the idea of seasteading. And it's an economic view of the service of governance. And we know that monopolies are always bad for the consumer and always good for the people who control the monopoly.
Yes.
And if you have a monopoly on the legal initiation of violence that provides the governance, that's the most important service in all of society. All social problems flow downstream from that. And that naturally arises from land, where people have no choice but to live on land, where it's the source of people's labor, it's the source of wealth. It gives rise to a natural incentive structure, in my opinion, that would incline it to be controlled by conquerors who would grab vast tracts of land and then sort of lay claim over all the people in it. And so the boundaries between these things are where the conquerors met each other and fought wars and stopped. And I think because human beings are naturally tribal animals, we confuse our desire to be part of a community with our identification with a nation state, because that's just how we think. It hijacks our way of thinking.
Yes.
But our nation is not actually our identity as people. I mean, you and I come from different nations, and we're bonding over our shared interest in something.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Yes,
and this
exactly.
So communities can form however they want. When I read Patri's explication that monopolies on governance naturally arise from the static nature of land, but if you founded civilization on water, if civilization was civilization.
Civilization.
And land itself could move about.
Yeah.
And people could choose the societies they were in. It would basically be, in my opinion, impossible for a monopoly government to arise from this, because from the ground up or the water up, you'd have choice among different people.
Yes.
So you wouldn't have a static thing where people have no choice but to live and people have to conquer it. From the beginning, you would have movable land with people making choices. And in principle, this would be better than what we have now. Not in theory, but in principle. Because you'd have variation and selection in societies themselves. So things we can't imagine now would emerge, and they would be improved because the thing doing the selecting would be the residents. So now the hard thing about selling this to people is it's kind of like, I always compare it to monarchs from Europe, or monarchists, demanding that Benjamin Franklin explain, well, why is Manhattan Island going to be better?
Okay. Oh, that's a very good comparison. Yeah, people would say, how do you know? You haven't been there.
Yeah.
It's in the future. How can you possibly know that?
Yes, and how would it be governed?
Yeah.
Why would it be wealthier than what we already have from the king? Are you not loyal to the king?
Yeah.
Why do you want to go do your own thing? Do you think you just want to escape paying your fealty taxes to the king? I can't imagine something new, so why should you be allowed to try it?
Yeah. That's a very good comparison, actually.
Yes, and then this...
And what's your answer?
So I can take this very far, and thanks for letting me do all the talking. Because I think that...
You're the guest.
Whatever you think of terrible things that happened on the western frontier in North America, it was driven by people saying, screw this, I'm going to go do my own thing, and then they're creating territories out on the west and continually moving and trying something different, and they're trying all sorts of ideas that people thought were crazy. And a lot of those ideas were very bad, like people shouldn't be allowed to dance. Well, those ideas didn't survive. Because people didn't choose those ideas. But then other places said, you know what, the women should have complete voting rights. And people said that's crazy. But then people moved to those places. So, if North America hadn't been a giant priesthood, where people could try different governance models and then choose among them, we wouldn't have demonstrated, humanity wouldn't have discovered that representative democracies can work, that women can make political decisions and change the world. All these innovations that have made the free world emerged from free choice among territories in North America. And then that became a bastion of wealth that was able to stand up to the rise of dictatorships and other kinds of nation states in the old world. And this, what was discovered in North America, spread. It spread to China. It spread to other places in the world. Now it's like considered common sense that democracy is better than dictatorship. That was not at all clear before it was demonstrated.
Wow. So
we still have 45% of the Earth's surface to try other forms of governance from the bottom up, founded in the 21st century, based on 21st century innovations, where the founders of those societies know that Twitter exists and that the internet exists. They're not basing their governance on the speed of a horse and quill pens. And the difference will be that there's no indigenous population to conquer. and it's going to require entrepreneurs to create better models and attract people to go there. So it's going to be peaceful and voluntary. So we have half the world's surface to experiment with voluntary societies, and seasteading is the way to do it.
That's beautiful. That's really beautiful. That was actually one of the aspects that drew me to seasteading. You mentioned two of the main ones. One was 21st century technologies, the internet. I, like you, I'm convinced that the internet and human interactions mediated by online or on-life means, because we are partly offline, partly online. There's not really a clear boundary. So on-life political relations and human interactions can lead to better decision-making processes. Then I realized that perhaps everything that took place online reflected mostly on offline politics, and that wasn't enough for producing really transformative changes in society. So it was then when I saw seasteading, and I thought, whoa, we have here the possibility of starting pretty much from scratch based on the idea of voluntary cooperation.
Yes, we can start from the bottom up. And when you're near Silicon Valley, as I am, you're surrounded by all these people with wacky new ideas that you're not smart enough to know if they know. And a lot of these ideas involve governance. People propose futarchy and fluid democracy, as it's called, and then it's reduced to arguing whether it would work theoretically. But if we can provide these people with actual platforms where they could go try this and demonstrate that it works better, now we're going to discover better things, and then it gets iterated on, and people come up with even better ideas. And this is solving the deepest social challenge in civilization, I think, which is fighting over control of governments.
And of land. And many places in the world have problems regarding ownership of land and inheritance of land, and also since when it belongs to who, because I used to be here and then you came and took it away from me. So the ocean and the fluidity of the ocean provides more, as you said, water of political relations that and lacks a whole set of problems that land does inherently has.
Yes.
Wow.
And again, it seems theoretical until you point out that cruise ships are floating cities. They're largely self-governing, sort of de facto self-governing, because they fly the flag of Liberia or Panama. And the cruise lines don't go to war with each other.
No, that sounds crazy.
Yeah.
Just to
because
say
it's so
it sounds
expensive
crazy.
to pay for a war. The only way you can pay for a war is you have a population you can confiscate from.
Yes, exactly.
And sell their children's future labor into debt.
Yeah, and you cannot do that on a seastead because, as your book says, there's no tax pool to take from.
Right, so you have no choice but to please customers.
Exactly.
And compete to provide something better.
I like that. I know that you're writing two books. I know. And one of them is about a future with seasteads and how voluntary association creates new types of societies. Are you allowed to talk about your book?
I would be happy to tell you, the first person on record, about these two books I think about writing that I can't find time to write because we're too busy trying to build an actual island.
Okay. I'm very, very happy to be the first person on record you are telling this.
So another problem I saw with explaining what seasteads could be is that, again, it's answering questions like, well, what about criminals? Well, what about war? What about, child slavery? instead of, and it puts me in a polemicist position where I'm arguing a side against someone who disagrees with me.
Yes.
And my first love is fiction. I started as a novelist, and the reason I love fiction is that it gets me out of my own head and allows me to let's think through actual characters working through what they would actually face in these actual situations.
Okay.
And what I love, the best fiction to me is not good guys versus bad guys, but
Yes.
good flawed people versus good flawed people in their different incentive structures. You know, that's part of what makes the Iliad so great, that you end up sympathizing with all the major characters on different sides. So my plan, I spent time brainstorming a novel with Max Borders.
Yes.
He's the former managing editor of Fee, and he wrote a great book called Super Wealth, which is a criminally underrated book. It's really great. We imagined a world in 2037 where the spiral is emerging on the ocean by itself. Yes, it's in the shape of a spiral galaxy.
I love it. I love it. Uh-huh.
And so there's many different things I could talk about this. So the reason it's in a spiral galaxy is that we're imagining a character named Raymond Kurtz,
Okay.
who founds the first seastead on the ocean in order to sell anti-aging therapies.
Oh, cool.
Becomes so wealthy he's able to pay for his seastead to be out there and create an economy such that people want to come out there and move there.
Okay.
But because people don't always get along, the people who attach to the initial central seastead maintain their distance. And so they form very different tribes that are branching out from the central seastead, which are forming sort of spiral arms. As the seastead spins in the garbage patch gyre, and as these different tribes 3D print their calcium carbonate societies,
Yes.
that move, the water moving through allows you to basically build seashell cities. So 3D, it's a future where 3D printing becomes cheap, and lots of the disaffected from all over the world with very many different cultures and religions attach, form different tribes, and the spiral emerges over time.
I love that.
Meanwhile, in the future, there's a place called the United State, singular.
The United States.
Yes.
Okay.
Which is sort of a surveillance society
Okay.
that runs something called the Protecticon. And it's a world where your iPhones have evolved into contact lenses.
I love it. Yes, I'm so waiting for that.
Yes. So
Yeah.
everybody has one of their lenses, they have a contact lens on it, and it allows them to have augmented reality.
I know.
So as I'm talking to you, I get to scroll through as we're talking and look at your most embarrassing moment that was caught on one of the many, So it's a hyper, a very high surveillance society.
Yes.
And meanwhile, this world has been emerging out on the Pacific Ocean that there's nobody in control of it. It's just happening. So maybe I'm explaining this too long. But so a young biotech researcher thinks that she's discovered the cure for aging.
Yes.
She learns that in the United States it's going to take 20 years and $10 billion to bring it through the hyperprotective regulatory process.
Okay.
So she flees to the scary spiral where lots of medical mavericks sell questionable therapies to people who migrate there so that she can find Raymond Kurtz and bring her cure to the world, which with hundreds of millions of lives at stake. So that was a long, drawn-out way of, so the people, so I have a woman who wants to do a good thing, and maybe a controversial thing in the United States, really is, and she can't make it happen. So she goes to the spiral where she confronts all these fears, which is there's refugees, there's people displaced from war in Asia that come up that are poor and are unclaimed and are stateless. There's pirates that kidnap children and force them to work on fishing ships. There's non-state regulatory bodies that are emerging. There's policing with different arms of the spiral and how they have to interact with each other. There's religious fanatics. There's everything you would fear. There's also it's the early days of emergent order, so there's really questionable scientific people offering quack remedies to people that could be dangerous. So she has to cope with all these things that we're afraid of about seasteading. Meanwhile, there's a person chasing after her, and he's a gentleman who works for the Health Oversight Board, who is a fraternal twin whose twin brother is severely mentally retarded because his mother, while they were in the womb, took one of the spiral's therapies and it affected his twin brother. So he has a guilt complex.
Yes.
And he wants to make sure this never happens again.
Wow.
So he is chasing this woman to prevent more medical disasters from happening because he believes the United States is a good thing and the spiral is anarchy. So he is dealing with his set of incentives inside a governance monopoly, and she is dealing with her set of incentives in a completely anarchic world. And then you're able to, so they're in conflict. And then so you're able to walk them through, like, well, what happens if the religious fanatics have their own arm of the spiral? What happens if there are, roving gangs of pirates? What happens with refugees? How do you handle immigration? Is this bad or is it good? How does it work out? You're gonna, so instead of you're forcing the reader, rather than winning an argument, you're bringing them through an emotional experience of what it's like, where even the protagonist involved has doubts. And the guy chasing after her has good intentions, but also has doubts about the system from where he comes. And then he works with his incentives. So just to tell you what the MacGuffin is, there's basically a child who's displaced from a war-ravaged land who, so surrounding the spiral is a lot of plastic trash.
Okay.
And there are huge numbers of refugees who have basically made floating islands out of the trash.
Okay.
Born among these people is a young boy with a disease I invent called digeria.
Digeria.
Yeah. Which is early onset aging.
Oh, wow.
So he's 7 years old and he's basically rejected by his tribe as cursed. And he kind of washes up on the spiral where this woman, seeing he's about to die, injects him with her therapy just before he's kidnapped by child slave or pirates, and the Health Oversight Board raids the spiral and destroys her scientific data.
Oh, I know cases of that.
Right. So then the boy on the pirate ship ages backwards and becomes a beautiful boy again.
Oh.
Freaks out the pirates, is thrown overboard. Where he is eventually reunited with the woman who recognizes the tattoo on his forehead, which identifies him as Curse, and realizes it's the same boy, and he's the only copy of her cure is in his DNA.
DNA.
So then it's a race against time to get him to the center of the spiral to meet Raymond Kurtz and draw the cure out of his bones. and share with the world before it degrades in 2 weeks and he dies.
Oh. Did he die?
Well, you'll have to wait and see. She has basically 2 weeks, and she has to cross every arm of the spiral and go through this hero's journey, meeting all these different cultures and struggling within each while trying to protect this child with limited time. And since she pursued a scientific career, she never had children, so there's that all going on with this sort of child she adopts, and the boy is a rejected orphan, so he's never had a mother, so there's a whole complex thing going on. Meanwhile, a well-meaning head of the Health Oversight Board is in hot pursuit.
Wow, that sounds extremely cool. I would like to say it's a shame that you are too focused on building a floating island, a seastead right now, because I want to read your book. Can you do both?
I just don't know. It's all in my head. So this has happened before. I wrote a novel in college, and then I went to law school, and I wasn't able to focus on law school because a novel kept growing in my head by itself.
Wow.
And I had to leave law school and write it. And that may be happening again because I'm focused on the Floating Island Project, but this story just keeps happening in my head. But I can tell you about my other book.
Yes, please. Do so.
So maybe it's a very corny title.
Okay, what's the
The working title is Quirky.
Quirky, I like that title.
So through all my studies into seasteading and
Yes.
and emergent law on the oceans, I feel like I've discovered that the world that Patri Friedman's dad writes about in The Machinery of Freedom, of decentralized providers of law, free market competing regulatory societies, free market competing seafood, ship safety, has been emerging on the oceans for centuries actually, and is well into its golden age, and that the decentralized world they propose could work theoretically is already flourishing on the oceans.
Oh.
And nobody talks about it, including people who work on the oceans, because it's just taken for granted.
I understand. You mentioned something similar when you say in your book that nobody mentions UNCLOS.
Nobody mentions UNCLOS.
UNCLOS.
Yeah, it's, I'm not good with acronyms, but yeah, the laws of when things work well, you don't.
Yeah, you don't perceive them, exactly.
And you don't argue about it.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
I could give you so many concrete examples.
Yes, please.
I think one of my favorite is ship salvors.
Ship salvors. What are ship salvors?
So you have your gigantic cruise ship. It's going from China to the U.S. It's in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, hundreds of miles from any country.
Yes.
In the middle of nowhere, among the other 100,000 ships that are on the oceans, you have $100 million worth of cargo on board, and you have a crew guiding this thing. You are many, many miles from the Coast Guard. You're many, many miles from any Navy. Your engine catches fire.
Oh.
It blows up.
Yes.
Your ship is on fire. You have people on board, and it's in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And you're stranded. You can't move, and you might sink, and it all might burn.
Oh my cosmos. That's no good. Uh-huh.
And how can this, the greatest, 90% of all international trade moves across these vast oceans on ships. It's not across bordering neighbors, it's on ships. There's a huge ocean economy in operation keeping you and I wealthy that nobody is in control of.
Yes.
And things like this happen all the time. And you're 1,000 miles from the Coast Guard. Are they going to rush out and save you? You don't have time. So what happens? How do you get insurance for $100 million, literally, of cargo that's all going to sink? How do you get insurance for your employees who are in danger of dying? Who's going to rescue them? Who's going to fix the engine?
Yes.
Well, the ocean is crawling with private, free market salvors who are out there to save imperiled ships and make vast profits doing this.
Oh.
So when the SOS goes out, these guys start racing to be the first one, to be the first one to get to the ship, and get a line on the ship. And there's a rule that if I'm the first one to get a line on the ship, I now am in charge of rescuing this ship.
Wow. So the rest step away? They don't do it?
The rest don't do it. They stand back and wait for the first guy to say, I'm not handling this, I need more help. And then other people can come in. So the question becomes, why are they doing this?
That's amazing.
What is the incentive? The incentive is, in antiquity, it was decided that if you rescue an imperiled ship and the ship owner can't pay the cost of saving the ship, you get to claim a certain percentage of the ship.
Okay.
Well, how is this decided ahead of time? You're a ship owner, your ship catches fire, you're in big trouble, you need people to be saved, you need your capital to be saved. There's people you don't know who are racing to save your ship. There is a one-page contract online that you can download that 2/3 of the Earth's surface has decided upon is the agreement, right? So you already know, as the ship owner getting a call from your ship, we're in trouble, that whoever you're not even talking to that's going to save your ship is agreeing to certain rules because they download it, they sign it, and you agree to it, and boom. And it's the same rules everywhere. It's not a 50-page state contract. It's a one-page thing that you and I could read, that anyone could agree on. So it happens spontaneously. And then there are more questions. So say, and on the top of this contract, it basically says, if you don't save the ship, you get paid nothing.
Okay.
So if you get a line on the ship, if you put out the fire, if you spend $1 million trying to save this ship, and some of your crew get killed, if you don't tow the ship to safety, you get nothing.
So there's incentive for doing good your job.
There's an incentive for you to do the best job you can do.
Yes.
It's not relying on your goodwill, it's relying on your desire for profit.
Okay.
And all the other salvors are not getting in and starting fights over who gets to control the ship. There's a process that has evolved over time for how ships are saved.
Wow.
So then you get a line on the ship, you put out the fire, you repair the engine, or you tow the ship to safety at great, great personal risk and at huge expense.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You spend millions of dollars to do this, and it takes a week.
Wow.
Then you get the ship safely to port, and the ship owner says, that was worth $100 million, and I don't have $10 million to pay you. So then the salver says, okay, well, I get to claim possession of 10% of the ship.
Okay.
In 75% of cases, the ship owner and the salver agree on the percentage that they get, right? Without any dispute, because the rules have evolved over time of how this works. But often, in 25% of times, there's a dispute.
Okay.
Where the salver says, okay, given what I did, I get 15% of your ship. And then the ship owner says, no, you get 10%.
Okay.
They then take their dispute to Lloyd's arbitrators,
Okay.
which is evolved out of antiquity, which is a dispute resolution court system that requires that you have no lawyers.
Wow.
That requires that you have no pre-existing contract.
between the parties.
Right. So if you already brought a contract to be enforced by governments ahead of time, they're not going to listen to your case because you've already made it complicated and expensive, and that's not what they do.
That's cool.
Their thing is so then they look at the level of the risk that was involved. They look at the level of the expense. They, get witnesses and where people testify and everything's recorded about how imperiled was the ship, how much risk did you take on, what bad decisions did you make a bad decision and not calling someone else to help you? Oh. And then they'll say, the ship owner, the salvor's wrong, he doesn't get 15%. He gets 10%, the ship owner is correct.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
So now they just issued a decision, and Lloyd's Arbitrators has no enforcement mechanism whatsoever.
Awesome. It's just getting better. Uh-huh.
You're getting this because...
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
If I explain this to other people, they don't get how significant this is.
No, it's huge. It's about peaceful cooperation, peaceful agreements, just voluntarism.
Yes, and people's fundamental selfishness leads them towards doing the right thing in a decentralized marketplace of services.
Which has been proven in several occasions to be a way to achieve optimal order when it comes to self-organized societies.
Right. And you are free. Like say the Lloyd's hears the case and says, no, the ship owner is wrong.
Okay.
Not only does he get 15%, he gets 20% of your ship if you're not able to pay. The ship owner is completely free to say, screw you, I'm not giving him anything. And I'm deferring Lloyd's decision. And I'm just going to continue to do business on the sea and pay the salver nothing. Well, then Lloyd simply publishes the decision. Okay. And now everybody in the industry knows that you're the type of person...
Yeah.
Because Lloyd's has so much respect.
Wow.
So everybody wants the business to keep moving. So I'll take a loss on this decision I think is bullshit so I can continue to do business with these people. And next time I have an accident, they'll save me. And hopefully we'll come to an agreement based on this precedent. But if we don't, we can go back to Lloyd's and I'll argue my case. What everybody wants is the disputes to be resolved quickly and to get back to business. The other thing that's interesting is you're also free to overrule Lloyd's and say, actually, I'm flagged in the UK, and I'm going to take my case to the British court. And what's interesting is that most courts, because they have so much backlog, have a general principle of we don't overrule these private decisions by Lloyd's.
Wow.
So since people already know they don't have an appeal in the state courts, they just don't do it.
That's awesome.
So these stories go on and on and on. Like, why are ships safe? Why don't you just get on a cruise ship and it's dangerous and you fall overboard? And because there's like 50 ship certification societies.
Yes.
Competing for the makers of ships to choose them to oversee their construction process.
Okay.
And they seek the best, fairest ones with the best record, and they pay them, come watch us make our ship and inspect everything, and we want your stamp of approval. And then they're free to say, like, okay, we want the house built at your dock, we want our guys to be stationed there for a month, and then everybody complies because getting the stamp of approval from a respected ship certification society is so valuable that the shipbuilders will make the sacrifice. And again, this is a completely free market, no states are in control situation.
Yeah, you know what I was thinking when you were saying the last bit about reputation mechanisms and how reputation mechanisms can give legitimacy to decisions that are not, that don't have any state involved.
Right.
And they're going to be huge in seasteads in the future. Very important.
Yes. I, in between pitching the seasteading book proposal and scoring a large advance for the book, I had to take a job while I was waiting for the book to sell. just being a salesman in a store, and the boss and the owner of the business was one of the nastiest, cruelest people I've ever met. He was a bitter, bitter guy, and every customer that left, he would curse out after they left. But in the marketplace, when people were in his place, he was the nicest, most serviceable, working hardest to please them person I've ever seen. And so he was a pretty nasty guy who in the marketplace, his selfish incentives inclined him to be serviceable. So an open market where you profit by serving other people inclines bad people to behave well.
Yes.
And a monopoly of governance in which the worst people get to the top inclines good people to behave corruptly.
Yeah, mostly because there are not very high incentives for doing the opposite. Because once you're in the loop, you're in the loop. And it's really hard to permeate it.
So that's the other book I want to write.
Yeah, I love it. Quirky.
People have told me it's really awkward and it doesn't work.
Well, it's very similar to your last name, and I think it does work.
Quirky.
Yeah, Quirky. It's like your seastead. Quirk's seastead.
Yeah, it's like rule by water. Quirky.
Actually, the prefix a in Latin means
not.
Yeah, so there's no rule on the water. At least tacit ones. There are tacit ones, like what you just explained.
Yes, that's why I don't want to call it quirky, because it'll be not quirky, and I think it will.
It needs to be quirky.
Yes.
Yeah, like the jacket. Look, I'm wearing this jacket because of you, Joe, for you. It's a carnival jacket. Because right now we are in carnivals everywhere in the world. Did you know that?
Celebrating the carnival.
I'm not celebrating the carnival because I'm in the Netherlands and it's like 1 degree and I'm indoors. But a lot of people in Brazil, in Colombia, even here in the Netherlands, Mardi Gras, I think, also is took place last weekend, but there's still people celebrating. There are huge celebrations that are closely related to seasteading. And you've been, but not now. You've been to Burning Man.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of people with cool clothes like this one.
Yes, and
which, by the way, I'm here inside is not 1 degree. It's like, yeah.
So you intuitively just raised a bunch of references there as to why a Burning Man is a precedent for seasteading. Here, look, I wore this shirt in honor of you. And if you, I love the documentary we made where you pose underwater with this shirt and point to it.
It says, "Stop arguing, start seasteading."
Yes. So
If you have it,
if I take away the cruise ship, if I take away the water on the cruise ship, that is the symbol of Burning Man.
Indeed.
And then if I do that, it's the symbol of seasteading. And then
yes.
if I just do the middle part, it's the symbol of Blue Frontiers.
Yes.
And if I do this and make 5 of those, and they're not floating on water but on a canoe, it's the French Polynesian flag.
That's
really nice.
People like to make fun of Burning Man, but the California Seasteaders take it very seriously. First of all, it's where I met Patri Friedman and where I first grokked the idea of seasteading when he told me about it. And I wouldn't have understood why it was possible if I hadn't already attended Burning Man 10 times.
Oh, wow.
So I love New Orleans.
Yes.
I wanted to attend Mardi Gras.
Yes.
And I attended Mardi Gras after I'd gone there on a non-holiday to see jazz and everything like that. But I don't want to upset anybody, but I didn't enjoy Mardi Gras.
Oh, why?
Because I felt it attracted people who don't align with my values.
I understand.
People who polluted a lot, people who got drunk and got in fights, and people who harassed women, right?
Yeah.
So you set up something awesome, and the jerks come out of the woodwork to come there and party. So then I had to ask myself, why doesn't Burning Man turn into Mardi Gras?
Yeah, why doesn't Burning Man turn into Mardi Gras?
Why don't the jerks ruin it?
Exactly. And they don't.
They don't. And why...
They don't.
And given that it's literally a gift economy, why doesn't it get overrun with parasites who just show up to take advantage? You could go to Burning Man and not contribute anything and just go from camp to camp, eat their food, drink their booze. You know, you could harass women and run away and get away with it probably.
Yeah.
So why doesn't it descend into Mardi Gras?
Why? That's a very good question. Why do you think that is?
It has an immigration policy that naturally emerges.
Okay.
It's in the middle of nowhere.
Yes.
It requires a large amount of suffering to get out there and struggle.
Yeah.
It's in the middle of a desert. You have to bring your own water. You have to bring your own food. You have to travel through dust. And it's the type of place where people want to work for months to go out in the middle of a desert, a lifeless desert, with no bugs, no plants, no nothing, where there's sandstorms and intense heat and intense cold, and build a giant work of art that you don't sign or get credit for, and likely burn it.
And it burns. Yeah, exactly.
For free.
Uh-huh.
So, that's a certain type of person with a certain type of value system willing to suffer to do this. You also have to have tickets to go, so it's sort of a private little city.
Yeah.
You have to pay for entrance. The type of people that just want to get drunk and harass women and throw up and throw trash in the desert, it's not worth the effort, because they can go do that at Mardi Gras.
Yeah, they can do that somewhere else. They do that somewhere else. You're right.
So a temporary economy I wouldn't have thought was possible, and a type of culture I couldn't have imagined, I watched emerge over the 14 times I went to Burning Man.
Wow.
So anyone who goes to Burning Man that many times and watches it grow from 20,000 people to 70,000 people as I did, and watches it maintain a culture over 15 or 16 years, and watches rules emerge such that there are problems that emerged in Burning Man's evolution that seem like death to the project, like ravers show up and play loud music and keep everyone awake and ruin Burning Man for everyone.
Okay.
Well, people established voluntary emergent rules for if you want the noise camp, you go there. You want the quiet camp, you go there. There was a huge problem where the porta potties, then there became like, what do you do with poop? People are pooping.
Yeah.
Then they had to hire a porta potty service. They brought in porta potties and people started throwing their trash into the porta potty.
Oh, yeah, I would imagine. Yeah, those things usually end up really dirty after a celebration.
Yeah. So the private company that was doing this was cleaning out the porta potties, and their trucks their vacuum things would get trash caught in it, and it would break their trucks. And they said, we're not providing this service anymore unless you guys solve that problem. And it became, how do you control 30,000 people? So Burning Man went on this campaign to, at the gates, tell everyone we're not going to get to do Burning Man if we don't respect the porta potty guys. You have to not throw trash in. We have to pay them for more porta potty, And then that problem was solved. So most of these solutions, you don't even know how they're solved. All you know is they're being solved from the ground up with basically no top-down enforcement.
Yes, like they would be on a seastead.
Like on a seastead.
Yeah.
So someone like me when you go repeatedly and watch it evolve, invariably you start thinking, what if we had more societies set up on blank slates? Because it's literally, there's no resources, there's no water, there's no nothing. It's completely flat, barren moonscape. And people created this thing you wouldn't think was possible. People interact in ways you wouldn't think was possible. I wouldn't have thought this could ever work, but it does work. What if you did it all year round? What if you had hundreds all over the world attracting different types of people? Wouldn't it be interesting what different ways we could discover?
Yes, definitely.
So I was thinking about that. And I wasn't the only one. Other people who went to Burning Man would say things like this, like, how do we take this out into the world? Wouldn't it be interesting if we had more Burning Mans? So a few years later, I was on a cruise ship. And I was immediately compelled by the fact that it was the highest standard of living I ever had, that it was cheaper per night than the hotel I was in Alaska the night before. There was ice sculptures and all the gourmet food I wanted and all the entertainment I wanted, and ballet dancers came to dance, and it was a floating city.
Yes.
And people working there were from like Southeast Asia, and they provided excellent service and excellent food, and it was almost like I had a personal butler named Pro-Wit, who was very gracious and seemed to share my sense that this was an exciting adventure. So I, instead of enjoying myself, was walking around the ship, literally trying to do back of the napkin calculations, because I was like, this thing must be...
Napkin calculations. Okay.
It's like, this thing must be worth way more than $1 billion. So if there's this many people paying, how many cruises do they do a year? And then I think there's more people working on it than there are passengers. Like, how do the economics of this work?
Yes.
And why am I so much more prosperous on a cruise ship? Why am I living like a wealthy person with a butler? And why are the people from poor countries living like middle class, working class people in the United States? They're getting tips. They're eating good food. They seem excited about it.
Nothing forced.
Yeah, and I couldn't figure it out. The only thing I could think, like, there must be a tax thing. It must be cheaper taxes, and I didn't know what the answer was. But what I definitely saw was, wow, you could have something the size of a mall floating around in the ocean, going to Alaska. And water slides, every amenity I could possibly want was within walking distance of my cabin. So 6 weeks later, I was at my 10th Burning Man.
Oh, okay.
Somebody introduced me to Patri Friedman and said, you'd probably be interested in seasteading. I'd never heard of it. I didn't know how to pronounce seasteading. And Patri explained in a very short period of time that he runs a nonprofit that wants to create floating cities on the sea.
Yes.
And because I'd just been on a cruise ship, I immediately said, oh, I can see why that's technically possible. I can see that humanity would move in that direction. I find it really odd that anyone would create a nonprofit to encourage it to happen sooner than otherwise. I don't see what the point is.
Okay, well, now you're in different tiers.
Yes. And then I went home and noticed that the Burning Man logo was based... the Seasteading logo looked like the Burning Man logo.
Uh-huh.
And that made me very curious. Because, like, what does floating cities on the ocean have to do with an ocean in the desert? And I didn't remember his name. It was like Patrick Freisman. So I started Googling, and then I found his blog. And he was the one who articulated this vision that I described before, that the oceans aren't claimed by any state. You can set up your own governance rules if you were to have a permanent floating island out there, and you would have variation and selection among societies, and you would unleash progress in the most important industry in the world.
Yes, governance.
And then that changed my life. I became a fanatic. I started pitching myself that we should co-write a book together and get it out on a mainstream publisher. And it wasn't until after we agreed to do that, many, many months later, I discovered he was the grandson of Milton Friedman and the son of David Friedman. I didn't even know that. And then that became an irresistible legacy because Patri Friedman is kind of proposing a technology that would be a practical application of his grandfather's and his father's ideas.
Exactly. And when you were describing how Lloyds resolves disputes, it sounded just like that.
Yes.
Yeah. Private courts, private dispute resolution systems. It is that. It doesn't sound. That's what it is. And it's on the ocean.
And because Lloyd's isn't a monopoly, they don't have variation with no selection. They don't have an incentive to proliferate billions of laws that all contradict each other. They don't have an incentive to we'll take 2 years or 10 years to resolve this dispute.
Yeah.
They don't need specialists to learn all the complexities of this and be polemicists for different people's sides and use archaic language that only they understand in order to argue about a simple dispute.
Yes.
They're like, the disputants come in, make your case in front of a court with a market incentive to resolve this as quickly and fairly as possible and keep it as simple as possible so that you guys pay us to resolve your dispute. And it works way better.
I like that a lot. How do you see that extending in the future in the context of seasteading? Let's say that you are here in your seastead cluster and I'm here in mine and we have a dispute. Let's say, I don't know which kind of dispute I can have with you or anybody can have with you, Joe. But let's say we have any dispute to resolve. How would the case of Lloyd's like the bank.
Yeah.
Okay. How would the case of Lloyd be extended to our seasteads?
So, if it would indeed be Lloyd's, which I think the early seasteads. So I'm moving my seastead because I don't want to live with your seastead because I have my own ideas, and while I'm moving it, I kind of bender yours.
Clothing choices.
Yeah, say yours is painted that color, and I scrape my seastead up against it and rub off your paint job.
No.
And I say, oh, sorry, I'll pay for your paint job. And you say, no, I paid an artist to make this beautiful. We're not just going to pay it. And I say, no way. I'm just going to put a patch on that thing, on your seastead that color. Right? So we don't agree on what I should pay you that I crashed into your seastead as I was leaving in a huff.
Okay.
So I think in the early stages, I wouldn't be surprised if it is Lloyd's, because it will be a natural incremental step. That they would also listen to disputes among seasteaders.
That's so cool.
But it wouldn't stay that way, because as seasteads became more sophisticated, as people got more pissed off at Lloyd's decisions because they don't have experience with seasteads, when people want something, entrepreneurs find ways to profit by providing it.
Yeah.
So I think you would have emergent dispute resolution organizations coming from the first 10 or 20 or 50 seasteads. The same way informal ones have emerged at Ephemerisle on the Sacramento Delta.
Yes. Please talk about them. I have heard some really interesting things about dispute resolutions.
Yes, so Ephemerisle is called Burning Man on the Water. It was founded by Patri Friedman and the Seasteading Institute in 2009, which is sort of like a floating festival where you have to bring your own land. And the idea was, we learn how to get along on the water and solve problems, and as we get better and better, we slowly move out down the delta and eventually out onto the sea. Idealistic vision. Now, it's been fascinating. Ephemerisle has grown. Ephemerisle has expanded. People who know nothing about seasteading have gotten involved because they become compelled by this alternative society they can create temporarily that floats.
Yes.
And it's been very interesting to watch it follow the same evolution as Burning Man. Because what they're dealing with now as they approach their 10th year is what Burning Man had to deal with as they approach their 10th year, which is, what do you do about people that, a 22-year-old who brings their giant dance party and all night plays a loud music, and old people like me want to go to sleep, and somebody is ruining Ephemerisle for everybody.
Okay.
So, what do? Do you call in the government to enforce a law?
No, that's not gonna work.
Yeah, the Ephemerisle community is dealing with this from the bottom up on social media. They're agreeing on rules. They're agreeing on how many islands should there be, how connected should they be. I didn't want to go to Ephemerisle because I'm getting too old, and my fellow oldster, Christine Peterson, saw me at Patri Friedman's wedding last night and said, you know what, we're creating Quiet Island. And I'm like, oh, really?
There is Quiet Island.
Maybe I will go this year. Because a sort of middle-aged person like me with their own values has entrepreneurially trying to create a situation where they want to create Quiet Island. How are they going to do that? I don't know. I don't need to argue about the details. All I know is an entrepreneur I trust, Christine Peterson, is doing it and leading it. That alone makes me say, okay, maybe I'll come to Ephemerisle if I can be on Quiet Island. And I don't know how she's going to get away from the ravers. I don't know how that's going to be worked out. But the success of Ephemerisle is measured by the number of people who have heard of seasteading.
Yes, and it's growing and growing and growing. This year, 500 people are expected. And it started 500 people, yeah, and it started really small. And
it's not whether 100% of them have heard of seasteading. It's the real success is when 5% of them have heard of seasteading. So it was founded in 2009 by people that are like seasteading ideologues. Then it became really cool, really fun, really interesting, a real experiment in socially getting along. And it attracted a whole new generation of people. So when I showed up at Ephemerisle 2 years ago, and I went around introducing, people would be like, well, who are you? And I'd be incredulous. I'd say,
you're the evangelist of the Seasteading Institute. Yeah.
I swear to God, Natalie, half the people would say, see, what the hell is that? Yeah. That's success.
Oh, because they don't notice what they are doing, and they are?
Yeah, they're not doing it because they're an early adopter ideologue. They're doing it because it's better. It's a better way to spend that week than another way they would spend that week. Because, and that's what I want seasteads to be. I'm not a seasteader. I just want a better job.
Yeah. You can't have a better job.
Yeah. Or say I work in a hotel in French Polynesia and they offer me a better deal on the seastead.
Okay.
I can go to the Floating Island Project and get a better deal. When people are, when people who aren't seasteaders are choosing it because it's better than what they could have otherwise, that's when we're succeeding.
Oh, I see.
And that's already happening with Ephemerisle.
And okay, just tell me that by the end of your week, everybody knew who you were.
No. I just wasn't significant.
Okay.
I just didn't matter. I swear to God. It was like a younger generation has taken over Ephemerisle. They're doing their own thing. They're building their own islands. They're coming up with their own innovations. It doesn't need me at all. They have talks. People talk about ideas. People rent barges. People figure out the rules. They figure out how to deal with the Coast Guard. They find ways to make it safer. It's all just happening. And it doesn't even need to call itself seasteading.
I'm really looking forward to the time where it's already out there and it's not just a few examples that we have, but it's spread everywhere. We will be able to see it.
And can I tell you one more anecdote?
Yes, please.
Ephemerisle hasn't just attracted people that don't know about seasteading. It attracts people that thought seasteading was BS and didn't like it. So Big Think a while ago kind of wrote a hit piece about seasteading, or a very unfair article that I didn't like.
Oh, really?
It was many years ago, back when we weren't popular.
Okay.
But then I go to Ephemerisle and I meet a guy, and he's the founder of Big Think.
Okay.
And I'm like, wait a second, what are you doing here? And then he finds out I'm from Seasteading, and immediately is like, you have to come on our show and talk about seasteading. And I'm like, I happen to know you didn't like us a few years ago, and now you're at Ephemerisle. Obviously, once you have a concrete example of early stage seasteading, now you're into it.
Yeah, that's quite cool. And what did he say?
I said, I don't trust that you're not going to film me and edit me in a bad way. So Mark Collins is much better in this kind of circumstance because he's speaking about it from a Polynesian perspective. So when he went to New York to speak at the UN, afterwards he went to Big Think, and then he talked about seasteading from his perspective as a Polynesian who also understands Americans. And it's one of the most shared videos we've ever had. And so it's another one of these places that seemed like they didn't like seasteading, and now they're supportive of it. And they've come out with like 2 videos featuring Mark Collins.
Yes, and the second one is longer, and they are both really beautiful.
They're beautiful.
They are so touching.
And he might have been converted because he saw a practical application that said, hey, maybe there is something to this.
I like that. I like that. That's why it's really meaningful. I find that it's very meaningful what we are doing.
Yes. We get to stop fighting and start demonstrating.
Exactly. This, I think it was August, at the Start of Society's Foundation Summit, the logo was also very similar. It was, don't argue, build. And that's what we are doing. And seasteading has a brother or sister movement called either the Charter Cities movement or the Startup Societies movement, and they're also trying to do the same. Just don't argue. We don't have time for arguing. We are tired of arguing. Arguing is not good. Let's just build.
Yes. And I think of seasteading as kind of a subset of that movement, that we all see the same thing if we could just create startup societies, because especially if you're in Silicon Valley, that's the source of solutions.
Yeah, if we can just create them, exactly. Let's just create. And you had in your podcast, Seasteading Today, Oliver Porter.
Yes.
Who created a privately run town.
Yes.
Sandy Springs. And he's doing perfectly.
Yes. It's so when you find the concrete example of what's possible, it's so good, it seems too good to be true.
Yeah.
So Oliver Porter was just a regular guy with no experience in government who basically found himself entrepreneurially inheriting Sandy Springs, Georgia, where he was in the position to just write the charter with no budget for how this town is going to run. So, he had like no tax money, nothing. So he just started off the cuff, blank slate, figuring it out. He wrote it out, the charter out on yellow paper in his basement, and then started finding every possible private service he could think of to do things like build roads, set up parks, provide this, provide that. And it became so successful that the model has been copied by numerous other small town jurisdictions. And it's even been imitated in Japan.
Wow.
So then it becomes like, so this is just, it's a random set of capricious circumstances that put this gentleman in the position of being able to rethink his own town where he has to use private services. And it's spectacularly successful at every level that you can, you can get into more detail if you if you just look up Oliver Porter or listen to our podcast. But then the question becomes, so wait, you just get one little startup society on land and it's that successful in the middle of nowhere? What if you had thousands of them? How many Oliver Porters are there out there? And I was completely surprised when we had our Tahitian seasteading gathering in French Polynesia, and there's Oliver Porter. He showed up.
Well, you didn't know he was going to be there?
I didn't know. Maybe my colleagues knew, but I was completely surprised. I was like, holy cow.
Oh, I thought you knew.
I didn't. And then at one point we had like a pause in the conference.
Yes.
And then he came up to me and he's like, if you guys need 5 minutes, I can get up there right now and pitch the Sandy Springs idea.
Nice.
So he didn't get to do that, but he was ready to at any moment to get up on stage and talk about why Sandy Springs works.
Nice.
But yeah, he's such a good storyteller.
Yeah, he is. He was telling me the story of how he replicated an Angelina Jolie film in Venice. I don't remember the name. When he was with his wife and they were in the gondolas and then they went to the same hotel. Angelina Jolie was in the film. He's a really good storyteller.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I thought you knew. I don't know how. I'm gonna try to say this in the easiest way possible. Now that you mentioned Sandy Springs, so before this talk, I was a bit late, actually, because I was having. A lot late. I was having a meeting with one of my PhD supervisors, and we were discussing the Nobel Prize in Economic Science, Elinor Ostrom. So for those who are not familiarized with the work of Ostrom, she speaks of governance of the commons. And she says that commons are these places like the ocean, by the way, and that's why it's related to seasteading. Commons are these places where you cannot really limit the access, like the ocean. People can pass, people can extract the resources. So it's really hard to make them exclusive. And also, the individual use of these resources can lead to what has been denominated as tragedy of the commons, which means the use of the good led by individual interest goes in detriment of the health of the whole ecosystem. So actually, Ostrom has a really interesting book called Neither Market Nor State, and there she legitimizes what we are doing with the Floating Island Project and other cases of seasteading. She didn't know, but she did it, because she says that whenever it comes to managing problems of the common, the best way of governing them are with systems like similar to what Oliver Porter has. Not the state and not a market, but somewhere in between that is self-governed.
Wow, you should interview her for a podcast.
I don't remember if she died. I should know this.
She died? Is this an old book or is this a new book?
No, wait. So her book was 1991, and I don't have, let's see, if she's alive or dead. I guess I should know. So Elinor Ostrom, what do you think, Joe? Yeah, she would be awesome. Yeah, she died in 2012. Oh, sugar, we cannot have her. Yeah, it would be so cool.
Now I have to read the book. We writers hate reading books.
Oh, it's so amazing. She has like 15 texts that just say seasteading. Well, they don't say it, but they explain why seasteading simply just makes sense from every single point of view you can think of, and both environmental, economic, and also political, which, by the way, are the three also chapters, like the chapter division of your book, and also my PhD thesis. High five me.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, those three aspects are so important, and I think that if we don't take them into account, whatever it is that we are doing, things will never thrive. But I see that in Seasteading and in the Floating Island project, we are. Governance, economics, and the environment.
Something I've learned from seasteading is that you can count on innovators to find you if you provide them any sort of forum where they can solve problems.
Yes.
Because seasteading sounds intimidating. How do you build a completely new society from the water up, including the rules and the laws and the services? Well, nobody can. But people can. So people come to you with, I have an idea for how I could do an algae farm or whatever. They come out of the woodwork for their chance to do their new thing.
So I guess you must have received so many emails by now of people wanting to be part of seasteading. What sort of proposals have you received? I want to do this on the seastead, or I have the perfect technology for what? What sort of things have you received?
If I were to just try to think about what we've received in the last week, it exceeds my ability to remember it all.
Wow.
So that's an example of how the global brain is so much smarter than the individual brain.
Yes.
And the belief that some smart person designs your society for you is a sort of secular creationism. What actually happens is it emerges from lots of people having their idea, and then they meet other people with similar ideas they can maybe connect to, and then they find a way to work it out, and it emerges over time. So people come to us with wave generation technologies.
Yes.
And the struggle is that everyone who sees seasteading sees how it serves what they want to do, and they think the seasteader is an expert in the thing they want to do.
Yes. I understand.
The engineers are like, obviously all seasteading is an engineering problem, and you must be an engineer, so let me describe for you my complex equations.
See.
Right. And the legal people come, it's just a legal problem. So if you can set up a sea zone, here's my constitution, or here's my, whatever. So the entrepreneurial role is to connect these experts to each other and get out of this situation where someone like me is a bottleneck between all the experts. Because I'm not qualified to assess all this stuff. We need the Blue Frontiers movement to become self-organized in a way it's slowly becoming now.
Yeah.
We have different working groups and all this, all working on their different things and allowing the way this is going to work to emerge.
Well, right now Blue Frontiers is working on expanding the number of volunteers it has, and it's designing how to be able to cope with what you've just said, with all the number of applications and emails that we receive every day.
Yes.
To become more global. Global. That we have local chapters and local working groups and self-organize and do meetups. All this is going to be part of the growth of the seasteading movement in the coming months.
Yes. And what I've learned being involved with a nonprofit, which I've never been involved with before, nonprofits rely on donations. We don't have that much money. How do you get people to do things? Well, you don't pay them in money, you pay them in meaning. And people will work harder for meaning and to belong than they ever will for payment.
That is so true. Yeah, that is very true.
And so, just this Friday, a young man, you remember I had to leave French Polynesia really early to race back and give a speech in Silicon Valley. Well, there's a young man in that audience who loved the vision. He's a Stanford student, and I'm an old man who's not very good with technical computer things. I grew up in the days before computers, so there's basic things that young people find easy that I can't do. So he offered to sort of be my personal assistant.
Oh, cool.
Once a week, and I met him for the first time since I saw him at the talk on Friday, and he swooped into my life and got so much done, worked so hard, and was so eager, and ran errands and fixed things on my computer and set things up and researched for me, and he got more done in a day than I've ever gotten from someone I've hired. And I was so grateful, because some of these things I struggle with, and I wanted to cry. And at the end, I'm turning to him to thank him, because he wanted to stay and keep working, and I'm trying to send him away. And I'm getting ready to say thank you, and he says to me, "Thank you so much. This is totally coinciding with what I'm passionate about." He's thanking me.
I get that. I completely understand him.
Yes, and it happened with Caleb Sturgis. Like, he did all this economic work for us, Caleb Sturgis, and I finally saw him at the Startup Society Summit, and I beelined my way to go thank him for all he's done. And before I could get words out, he's like, "I just want to thank you. I think this is a great thing. I feel fulfilled doing my work." It's like, wow. It's like people, that's another thing I learned at Burning Man.
Yeah.
People, the deepest human need is to belong to something larger than yourself that you find meaningful.
No. Which, yeah, you don't need to pay me for what I'm doing, actually. I completely understand. And I was a volunteer, actually, of Blue Frontiers for months, for like 7, and it was, I think, taking more time than my PhD. At some point, when I attended the most meetings, I was attending 9 meetings per week. And I did it with the passion that the subject has, and it's just amazing.
It's been amazing to witness, because you never not have energy.
Yeah, well, coffee helps a lot.
It's really inspiring to see, and of course, just recently, you put every aspect of yourself, publicly online on behalf of the project. I mean, your personal reputation, your face, your job, and your scholarship. That's some serious courage that comes from a commitment to something that you don't get from you can't pay somebody to do that. A person has to believe that it matters.
I kind of understand what you are saying, but it just seemed like the most natural thing to do. Like, I do believe 100% in seasteading. It's not believe, I just know it. Yeah, I would do it over and over again. I don't mind.
Yeah. You've demonstrated it with your joy, and I don't want to embarrass you too much, but I'm just very, very.
Oh no, I don't mind.
You've gotten involved.
Oh, oh, I'm glad. Yeah, I don't mind. It's honestly. I think about seasteading probably all the time I'm awake, because that's all I do. So if I'm not working on the PhD, which is about the floating island project, then I'm doing something related to Blue Frontiers. So it's most of what I do when I'm awake, and I get a lot questions about like when you have something else to do, then you get bored. And I think of that's a very unfair thing to ask, because let's say I was a musician. So if I spent all day playing the guitar, people would get it more, because it's because it's not an intellectual passion. I don't know how to explain this, but people tend to get more the fact that musicians, all they do all day is playing music. than simply being really stimulated mentally by a concept or a subject.
Right. And feeling like you can contribute to making it happen.
Yeah, exactly. That is the best part, definitely.
Yeah.
You must know that.
Yeah. And Mark Collins is the same way. If he's awake for a minute, he's doing something with regard to the Blue Frontiers community and the project. I have the same thing. I mean, I think I struggle with exhaustion sometimes, but it's the same thing. It's you can't. There's so much to do, and there's so much possibility that
Yes.
It's consuming.
Yes, consuming in a good way.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's meaningful.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And frankly, I don't think I had that until I discovered this. Writing books about things that are interesting and having a successful personal life with good friends and a good wife and nice dogs. That's one kind of thing, but if you move up that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I think is semi-mythical, it takes away all these other needs, and you realize what you want is to participate in something that's more important than you. But you have to believe that it's going to work, and it's always very difficult. I'm just fundamentally agnostic that any particular political movement is going to result in what people want.
It's very sensitive.
Very sensitive?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
It makes sense. Yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying.
Yeah. But seasteading was the thing that made me say, this is going to work.
Because it's not only a political movement, it has implications at so many levels, and every single one of those seems to make sense that there's just no other way around.
Yeah. It's like meta-political. It's beneath, it's providing you the platform to try
Exactly.
your thing.
Exactly. And it's not only about one specific way of solving problems. It's about opening the whole spectrum by increasing the degrees of freedom and just seeing what you can do.
And what I tell people is, you got a problem? What is your problem with society? I'll tell you about an aquapreneur who's trying to solve it through seasteading.
That's true.
The first thing that came to my mind was corruption.
Yeah. Now tell me about that.
How will it solve corruption?
You tell me.
Well, I wonder if you had a Colombian perspective or a South American perspective.
Yeah, that's why the first thing that crossed my mind was corruption. So there is, corruption and concentration of power. How does seasteading solve that? Okay, many ways. One of them is that the fluidity of the medium and the detachable of the settlement means that you don't need to be subjected to the authority of a corrupt government just because you are forced to be there. Because passport or economic means, you can simply, if your house floats, you can move. If you can move it, you can go to a different type of settlement where the market of governance has made it provide better governance services. So when it comes to seasteading and corruption, the fact that there is not only one government established, but many multiple ones that you can just gravitate around until you find the one you prefer, means that there is an incentive to do things better, which corrupt governments don't have because everything is just previously established. And also decisions are made in a black box in traditional governments. And I see in seasteading, because it's very high tech and it's starting at this point, I see that many of the decision making will take place in a more transparent way.
Right.
And transparency decreases the possibilities of corruption.
And like we're both interested in the decentralization of power
Yes.
among humans, right?
Yes.
That's I think that's the Startup Society's movement, and this comes from a philosophy. I mean, I think human nature exists. I learned that writing evolutionary psychology books.
Uh-huh.
So our moral instincts evolved, and the question becomes, why are we so cooperative in so many ways, providing so much prosperity for so many people, and why are we so violent in other situations? To bring it down to a microcosm, why was my old boss such a jerk in some situations and so serviceable to strangers in other situations?
Yes.
And I think it's fundamentally that we have a hierarchy of things we love. We love ourselves and our family first. Maybe we'll love our allies next. And strangers are way out there. So what would cause me to bring a lot of services to strangers? If you put my fundamental human nature in a situation where I have great political power over you, I will always choose my family first. I will always pay back my allies. And I will always see you as maybe I do kind of like you, but you're basically a resource I can use to feed my family and my children.
Exactly.
Which is what tends to happen when it comes to having a government.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
But if I have to persuade you to pay me for governance rules, suddenly my boss is turning into the nice guy, where the way I engage my selfishness and my interest in serving my family is to provide services to strangers.
Yes.
And that emerges from a decentralized marketplace in which my self-centered nature can integrate with my desire to make the world a better place and have services with strangers.
Exactly. Exactly.
I ordered food last night for my wife. A woman rang my doorbell. I opened the door. She smiled at me. I wasn't afraid of her. She handed me food. She said, "Have a nice evening." And I said, "You have a nice evening too." And we smiled at each other. Thank you. And she went away. Why would this stranger come to my house and give me food? And the both of us have this little moment of mutual goodwill between two people that will never see each other again. That is remarkable. It wasn't long ago when people of different tribes had a harder time doing that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and that's why they invented fake money with associated value to
Yes.
simplify transaction costs, but they ended up messing it up really bigly. Well, they don't, because people believe in the value of money, so...
But all we need is to not have a monopoly over the provision of money.
Yeah, exactly. Which goes very in line with seasteading.
Yes. Having a monopoly over the provision of money is a form of governance. It has a huge effect on everything that emerges from it. It gives you a tremendous amount of power if you have that power. And,
Yes.
And lo and behold, it ends up being corrupted. There we go again, human nature. But money is it's an emergent phenomenon that emerges among any people that trade. I think of it as simply the thing most easily traded for other things.
Yeah.
And then, if gold is too heavy, it becomes pieces of paper, and then a state comes in and claims control of the pieces of paper and illegalizes other ways of paying. And there you have it. Now you have a monopoly over that provision. But again, money, just like everything else, can evolve in a decentralized way and emerge naturally.
And it is now.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. And I'm sure the seastead will see its bit of it.
Yes.
Of the market of decentralization of money.
Randy and I used to complain that when we went to Randy Hinken, seasteader and co-founder of Blue Frontiers, and original conceiver of the floating island strategy, we used to complain that when we go to conferences to talk about floating societies, everyone thought we were crazy everywhere we went, 4 years ago. Unless we went to the Bitcoin conference. All of a sudden we were popular among the nerds. They were like, "Oh, you're the seasteading guys, we love you." So
And that's why Randy got surprised a few months ago when he went to a legal conference to talk about seasteading, to pitch Blue Frontiers and the coming ICO. And people were not familiarized with it because it was a crowd of lawyers.
Yes. So he probably had a tough time. He was probably selling a strange idea.
Yeah.
At a Bitcoin conference, people are already familiar with the idea and they already love it and they want to do their cryptocurrency on a seastead.
Yeah, and they can't wait.
Yeah.
Soon. Hopefully soon. Very soon.
And the more people adopt these cryptocurrencies, the more stable they will become. And the more they can compete, the quicker we'll get to the ideal form of money for the 21st century.
Yeah, people are scared, especially recently with the crash. But please tell your appeasing message to future cryptocurrency buyers.
It's all relative. One way to look at it is, oh my God, it crashed to half its value in a few months. Another way to look at it is, well, this time a year ago, it was 1/4 of its value. So it's gone up 4 times in 1 year.
Exactly.
And that's not to say Bitcoin will be the dominant cryptocurrency someday. I mean, maybe others will outperform it. Maybe it'll go to zero. Maybe we'll switch to another. But it decentralizes the provision of money and creates a marketplace where the best money serves the people who need it most. And it's only complicated now because it's in the early days.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just starting, like everything.
It was like a decade ago, people were saying, I'm not going to use my credit card online. I'm not typing my credit card.
Oh, yeah, actually, yes, I've heard that.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not gonna put. Yeah. Oh, no, even with cameras. I'm not gonna let you take a picture of me because you're gonna take my soul away. I know someone who didn't. This was like when I was a girl and camera still had those films, and you had to. So, yeah, she didn't let me take pictures of her because I was gonna take her soul away.
Yes.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, even that seems to emerge from human nature because that reaction has emerged in multiple pre-industrial places around the world, where it's so weird that you flash a light and then the person has an image of you on a piece of paper.
Yeah, if you
took
think
something
about
away
it.
from me. Yeah.
It's weird, the concept. It's like a radiography. You can see through me? What? Yeah. But it's possible. I mean,
Yeah, now we just take each other's privacy away.
yeah, like I'm recording this conversation.
Yes, and we've all just given ourselves over to it. That was another big objection a decade and a half ago, which is if you allow, I don't want all my private stuff to be on the internet where anyone can get access to it, my life will be ruined. But
Yeah.
a generation of young people didn't care and just allowed that to happen, and the world didn't come to an end. Though there's all sorts of terrible challenges that we're facing, but
Yeah, it's not gonna be the end of the world. We're just starting.
yes, and then other entrepreneurs will swoop in and try to innovate and find ways of protecting people against humiliation and preserving privacy, and there's all sorts of innovative people working on those problems right now.
And they are huge problems because on one side you can say, okay, I can give away a bit of my privacy as long as that brings me more safety. On the other side, you say, okay, if I give a bit of my privacy to get more safety, then I am becoming more surveilled. So there are really interesting dilemmas there between to which extent you share, what are the benefits.
Which platform you share on?
Yeah.
How private are the different platforms?
Yeah, exactly. Should I buy these contact lenses with this type of augmented reality or these others? This one have more targeted advertisements, while these ones sell my data to I don't know who. It's going to be so interesting.
Yes. Yes, it's going to be. I want governance to be like ice cream. I don't just have chocolate and vanilla, and that's all I can imagine is possible. And then I have to fight with all the ice cream buyers every 4 years, and we vote, and then everybody gets vanilla.
No, I don't like that. That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense at all.
And yet that's how we decide things in the most important industry in the world.
Worse, people want that to be the ice cream decision making system.
Right.
Ice cream, yeah. You should buy ice cream if it comes to flavors in Baskin Robbins, because they have all the flavors in the world. But if it comes to political decentralization, you should buy ice cream at Ben and Jerry's, because do you know why?
Do I know why I do?
Yeah.
Because it tastes good.
Because there is a link between the son of one of the Ben and Jerry guy and Occupy Wall Street. Going back
Really?
to yes, don't tell anybody.
So when I was 19, I was present when Ben invented Heath Bar Crunch, and I might have been the first young man to try it.
To try Ben and Jerry?
To try Heath Bar Crunch.
Wait, what is Heath Bar Crunch?
It's Heath bars crunched up in ice cream.
Whoa, that sounds really nice.
So he started in Boston. I was in Boston when I was about 19. I went to a little ice cream convention. Ben and Jerry's were just starting out. They had this crazy idea where they'd invent weird flavors. And he was mixing Heath Bar Crunch in front of me.
Wow.
And he literally said, "Hey kid, I just invented this. Taste it and tell me what you think."
Really?
Yeah.
Whoa, and what did you say?
I literally tasted it and I said, "Ben, this is the best ice cream I've ever tasted."
Whoa.
He was really happy, and then he gave me a free cup of it. And I wasn't lying. That remained my favorite flavor for probably a decade.
Wow. Did you ever write to him or anything?
No, and he wasn't. He was just a local Boston ice cream guy at that moment.
Nice.
Wow, I love it. I really love it.
But imagine if I asked you, if I wanted to predict what kind of ice cream flavors you like. I said, Natalie, so where do you fall on the ice cream spectrum? Are you left or right?
I would say, Joe, that I like to have choices.
But there's only two choices. There's those asshole vanilla people and us awesome chocolate people.
Yeah, I'm sorry to tell you, Joe, but that's not really how things are. I know that that's how it seems, and I definitely know that that's how this thing called media portrays things, but you can explore on your own other alternatives that actually make more sense, because the world is not really vanilla or chocolate. There's a huge spectrum.
Oh, okay. And so on this so-called other flavors you speak of, what flavors would they be? How would they taste?
They taste so delicious. Let's say that today, what day is today? Monday, 9:30 p.m., you are in the mood for candy, cotton candy. Because Mondays at 9:30 p.m. you like cotton candy ice cream, so you can have cotton candy ice cream. But you don't agree with having cotton candy ice cream every day at every time. So for other aspects, for other moments of your life, then you want to have lemon sherbet ice cream. It's just about choice.
You sound like an ice cream utopian. I mean, and I'm already mad at you because you're not being loyal to we chocolate people, that we have to defeat these vanilla people, otherwise we'll get another 4 years of vanilla.
I am sorry, Joe, but I'm too busy trying to create new flavors. I don't have time for that discussion.
Right. Yes, exactly. You're a
Just eat yours I'll create mine.
And of course it's absurd that there would be such a thing as a line, and you can position yourself along this line, and then I can predict a long list of opinions that you must have by putting you in that group. Like, the diversity of social relationships is far more infinite than the number of potential ice cream flavors.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
But yet we think if we just choose from among two choices, that'll carte blanche take care of all these other things, and that's the best possible world we can have, is either chocolate or vanilla, and I just can't see outside what's possible.
That doesn't make any sense. You need smarter choices.
Yeah.
Also because your life has so many different dimensions that there is no single set of, and also people change, so what you think is best now is not going to be the same that what you think 10 or 5 years from now, and it's okay to have those diversities in your own thought. So if you have them in your own life, there is no reason why yours are going to be the same as other 40 or 150 million people.
Yes, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's really ridiculous. That's the least you can say, ridiculous. That's a compliment.
And we already have townsteading. I mean, I've changed towns.
Oh yeah, good point. Townsteading, yeah.
And I weigh the pluses and minuses, and nobody says to me like, well, that's just because you're rich that you can afford to switch towns. You shouldn't be allowed to switch towns. You have to be forced to stay in this town. So we allow choice at that level.
It's very selfish.
Yes.
Yeah.
And imagine if all these towns could move about and disassemble and reassemble elsewhere, we'd have rapid innovations.
That would be so awesome. What type of system would you like to move in?
I would be inclined to incrementally choose more voluntary and more sustainable. I like the environmentally restorative angle of the Floating Island Project. I find that very seductive.
Yes.
Can you explain for those who don't know what it is about?
Well, the floating island is, everyone talks about sustainability, but I don't want to sustain the polluted world we have now.
Yeah,
I want to restore the ocean environment especially, which has been particularly abused. Yeah. And that this is a possible through Blue 21's concept of cyclical metabolism. First of all, the floating islands are designed to allow coastal and island countries to adapt on their own organically to sea level change. So, the island nations of the world, they didn't cause sea level change, but they're doing something about it, and they can solve it on themselves. Again, the idea that we just need the states of the world to all get together and properly tax businesses so they can control the thermostat of the planet based on their promises, which will then lower the height of the seas. This is superstitious thinking. But if it is indeed a problem, and it's a problem in different places, we can get your friends at the apartment that you're staying at to build what they've already created, which is sustainable, solar-powered, floating platforms in shallow waters that already recycle their own water and all that. So the technology already exists. So, as Kiribati slowly transitions into becoming a seamount, which is a high mountain just below the oceans, they can transition into being a floating country, island by island, as they lose their islands.
Exactly, and they will, because the president of Kiribati is looking very, very closely at floating islands as land replacement mechanisms.
Yes, and I wish the nations of the world would organize, instead of trying to save the planet, let's save an island nation. Let's start there, and we could provide floating Blue Frontiers platforms for Kiribati.
I love that. I actually love that.
It's tragic. Like they're going to move to New Zealand. That's just wrong. They're going to lose their giant EEZ, their EEZ, their economic zone.
So that's what it's. That's the possibility that they move to New Zealand.
They're talking about relocating.
Relocating.
And I think the first choice is New Zealand. And I think this would be tragedy to lose this culture and this magical place.
Yes. No, I think that we'll have the business enough in place by then.
I think so.
Yeah. Maybe some do go to New Zealand, for sure. But I think what we are doing is going to make possible.
Yes.
Two of the biggest problems in the world are sea level change, floods, and the lack of startup innovation and governance. And Blue Frontiers has a business model to solve both problems immediately.
Yeah. At the same time that it creates a very active market with very, very attractive economic profits for anybody who wants to innovate in blue tech.
Yes. And just by nature of concentrating all these blue tech people in one place, just being there among those people, if you're interested in one of those technologies, will be good for your business.
Yes.
People really underestimate the value of being there, especially in this network-mediated era. But one of the things that still prevails is face-to-face interaction, like being there. Like right now, for example, I am in Rotterdam visiting the architects of Blue 21, who are part of Blue Frontiers and who are designing the floating island project. And I go to their office every day to work, and we have lunch every day, and it definitely gives you a very, I forgot what I was going to say, a deeper understanding of all the matters. Okay, I know what I was going to say. So Blue 21 is located at a startup incubator. And it's one of the coolest places I've ever worked at, because there is an O-Tech company. There is an O-Tech company. There is a company that does solar glass. So, yeah, and they are so beautiful. Let me see if I can show you a picture here. They have a company that has electric cars. They just simply have everything. In fact, we make the joke that everything the Seastead could need could be taken from that startup incubator. And the way in which launch is arranged is, launch is arranged in a way that everybody can sit next to each other and talk. And that generates collisions, and that generates emergent, spontaneous opportunities of collaboration. So going back to putting all these people together in the same place, putting all these people in the same place does have an added value. So you can have an idea about, I don't know, a financial technology, but let's say that you happen to meet on a Seastead someone who is already working on developing one aspect of it. Definitely you are gonna either know more or become more into it or create your own business. I don't know, but there's a really huge value in putting all these really interesting people together in the same place.
Yes, and if you think about it, like our social emotions evolved to share meals and to look in people's faces and sit in the same room with them. So even if we want to have a conflict with them, we're getting all this other information going on that kind of lubricates how we decide things, which is so much different from getting an email or even a conversation like this, you know. It's really great to just sort of be in the same room with people and work together. And is the O-Tech company Blue Rise? Is that the name of it?
I can ask.
Okay, it's no biggie. But yeah, it's funny. We could just float that incubator.
Yeah. It's called Yes Delft.
Yes Stepped?
Yes Delft. Delft, like the city that is near Rotterdam. And Yeah,
Delft.
Delft, yeah.
Yeah.
And yes, I don't remember what it stands for, but it's part of the Technical University of Delft.
And have you been able to like see with your own eyes like the Netherlands facing high seas? Like, do you see it and feel it there, or?
Yeah, so I have actually I went last Sunday with some of the members of Blue Frontiers to the Rotterdam pavilion. So it's a floating pavilion and it's so beautiful, and when you are there you don't really feel that you are floating. It's completely static. It doesn't move. Actually, Karina, one of the architects, said that once for some reason she was at a meeting at a high building from where you could see the pavilion, and there was a storm and all the trees were moving and everything was moving and the pavilion was really static. So I went there and they had the most interesting material for walls. So it looked like some balloons, like the walls, the pavilion is round, so a dome, 3 domes, and they were curved, each one of them. So what they said was that the walls, in order to make it light, are filled with air. So it's like a floating greenhouse that is very resistant because they are like this. If you throw something, it will bounce, boing. So yeah, and this one is connected to the grid, so it's not solar, but
It's connected to the grid.
yeah, it is connected to the grid. Yeah.
The pavilion uses electricity from the grid.
Yes, but not the design of the floating island. Yeah.
So,
This was 10 years ago.
The way you just described the cells in the walls, it's almost like, are they designed to be like lenses that kind of focus light or something, or?
Not these ones, but the ones I saw at the startup incubator, the company, yes. So I have a picture here actually, but you might be able to see differences in color, because in order to save the energy consumption of my phone, I have a very red screen that saves energy. So let's see here. Maybe you can see, maybe you cannot see. So these are can you see?
oh, yes, I can.
Yeah, so it's glass and it's solar panels.
So, but can you see through it?
Yes, you can see through them. You can see, okay, let me make them bigger. You can see through them, so they are transparent, but they have these bubbles, so you won't be able to distinguish shapes very clearly because of this rugosity. But they are translucent. Yeah, should we float the incubator?
Yes, float the incubator. And those will evolve into being just like perfect windows.
Yes, yeah, oh yeah, completely. Yeah.
And then we will have light bulbs made of bioluminescent algae.
Oh, I would love it.
Another Dutch people are working on that.
Really?
Yes, bulbs with algae in it, so that if you hit the bulb, it jostles the algae and it glows a lantern of green.
That must look so beautiful.
Yes.
Wow, because in the ocean it looks so beautiful.
Yes, I mean, I'm going to have these in my spiral novel. These emerging ocean-based technologies that are coming that we can't even imagine.
Yeah.
I think we're actually seeing them in our biomimicry group, led by Francois Briant.
Yes.
He's working on imitating shark skin and to keep, a mechanical way to keep germs off, and basing the cooling mechanisms on termite mounds and all this sort of imitating nature sort of stuff. So I think we can create a completely new world that looks completely different on the oceans. And I think that's when everyone will become fascinated by seasteading and the floating island project.
The architectural possibilities are simply limited. You have a different I'm not an expert, I'm not an architect, but what I've seen is that you have to think differently when you think floating than when you think on land. Firstly, you don't need foundations, for example, and that both limits and also gives space to all the things you can do. But you must know that because you are the one who wrote the book on seasteading. And I'm looking here, for example, I have here this really cool, how to call it, the trajectory.
Yes, that was made by your hosts, by the way.
My host.
Yes, that was made by Bart.
Ruffin.
Bart Ruffin, and based on the vision of Blue 21.
Yes, you couldn't have chosen a best architectural firm.
It was another one of these things I couldn't. When we discovered them, I just couldn't believe that they actually existed. It just seemed too good to be true.
And they are working now on floating solar.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Rutger de Graaf. Have you met him?
Not yet, but it's his birthday today.
Oh, really?
Yeah, today is his birthday, so I'm gonna self-invite myself to his birthday party on Friday.
Wow!
Yeah.
Say hi. I'm a present from Joe Quirk. He sent me.
Yeah, you were the one who sent me. Yeah, and he's become a really key part of my PhD.
Really?
Yeah.
How so?
Yeah, well, because he speaks on governance, and as you said when you sent me to him, it's not common for an architect or an engineering perspective to speak also of governance. So both Rutger and also another Rutger who was working with him doing the research here in Netherlands, they're both speaking about governance and what were the possibilities of floating infrastructure in deltas especially.
Yeah. All those Blue 21 guys are all multidisciplinary, and that's what's interesting about them, because they're thinking about governance and they conceived of seasteading without knowing that word. They've independently come up with these ideas, and it's very practical for them because they're creating a new thing that doesn't, where the laws for the land don't apply anymore. Because now we're floating, and now we can move things around, and how do we define this, and don't we need new rules? And that got them thinking about, we need different regulations for floating things than we have for land things, and what will happen when we move into international waters? How would that be governed? Wouldn't it be more governance than government?
Exactly. Yes.
And Rutger articulated all that in his thesis many years ago.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about meeting him. I haven't met him yet.
It's quite visionary.
Yeah. Yes, I'm here with Barbara Dalbosanon. So she is very interested in system dynamics and on biomimicry also, and on providing a whole ecosystems perspective to the design of the floating island project. So instead of simply looking at the ecosystem and putting the platform and then having a hierarchical relation of the platform or the seastead over the environment, she wants everything to be integrated and being conceived from a systems perspective where there is no hierarchy of the elements.
It sounds like she is your Rutger, because it sounds sort of like your scholarly work or your ideas, what you just described.
Yes, so I couldn't be in the best place, best project, best architect. Sometimes everything just feels as if it makes sense, and that sometimes has become more often that I can't believe it, and it's amazing. Yeah.
It is incredible.
How you you have a new idea, a new vision, and you feel alone. But with enough exploration, you find other people that not only have a similar vision, but are enhancing your own view and have already made progress on what you want.
Exactly.
And that's what appears to be happening with the global seasteading movement.
Yes. And it's going to happen more and more and more because we are going to have meetups and local chapters. So more
Local
people.
chapters.
Yes. Local chapters. So more people are going to know the project.
And you're also, I guess you're at ground zero for innovation for sea level rise.
Who, me?
Yeah, I mean, the Netherlands are the most advanced sea level rise.
Yes.
Yeah, and there's so many deltas here and so much water that it was very visionary for the government to say, hey, you know what? Why don't we treat water as if it was land? And the government, there are some cases, for example, where the government has built sold plots of water.
Yes.
Yeah, I've seen that.
I remember, I guess it was Rucker who first told me that. I was kind of blown away. Like, just sell plots of water. Because
That makes sense.
It only makes sense if you're being flooded all the time and people have foundations on swamp, and then you can be more stable if you float.
Exactly. Yeah. I cannot wait to move. I don't think I'll have time to move on a seastead in the next 10 years, and probably you also not, even if you haven't fully convinced your wife, because you'll be working on building more and more and more. But I can't wait for all these political and engineering technologies to just be put in place there.
As soon as we have a dog stead, if I can get dogs on the floating island, then my wife will come.
As soon as we have a cat stead, I'll go.
Well, we're going to have to vote and argue with each other whether there's going to be only dogs or only cats. Oh, no, wait. It'll be seasteading. We don't have to do that.
Yeah, no, you don't have to waste time. Sorry, contribute to democracy. Sorry, you don't have to do that. You don't. I think it's becoming a bit... I have a lot of water flowing behind me.
Oh, yeah?
I don't know if you can hear there.
I hear someone doing dishes.
Yes.
There was someone doing dishes. Joe, should I let you go?
I suppose so. I have to go make a video now.
You have to make a video. A video of what?
I'm embarrassed to say it's actually a video about myself.
Oh, okay.
But I just completed one about Lele Lalalu.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, he gives a great interview at the Tahiti conference, and so we made a little video out of that.
I loved it. Both the talk and the video. Yeah, I did. Wow, he's such a visionary.
Yeah.
And so he's so charismatic. Like I just have to smile when he's just very erudite and charming and interesting, and brings his islander perspective to things. It's really good.
Oh, I love it. So your video is about you.
Yes. So there's also interviews with me there that are all chopped up in different pieces, and we're thinking of putting them together in one little video.
Okay.
And then I have great shots of Karina giving a short interview, and a great one of Igor, and a great one of Mark.
Oh, nice.
So I'd like to put those together too.
Nice. I'm looking forward to it because the Lele one was just perfect. And all the 3 mini documentaries, they were just beautiful.
I'm glad you like it.
I love them.
Good, I'm glad you like it. It's painful because all those people had so many good things to say, including you. And then we just had to take since we didn't want it to be too long, we had to be short, we just had to take the best little moments and splice them together. But everyone should go to the actual talks. Watch your talk, watch Pauline's talk, So in those videos, that links to the talk, so you can see the whole talks of each of those people if you like.
Yes, and they are on the website and also on the YouTube channels of both Blue Frontiers and the Seasteading Institute.
Yes.
Yay!
You can always go deeper if you want.
Yeah, exactly, like the media does.
So I hope everybody listening joins our community and becomes enthusiastic as the seavangelist and the seavangeless.
Yay! Oh, I'm sure they will, Joe.
It's been very nice seeing your smiling face.
It's been very nice to be talking to you. I hope we can chat again.
Yes, it was nice to see Barbara in the background there. And please wish Rutger a happy birthday.
I will. I will wish him happy birthday.
And say hi to Karina and Bart.
I will.
I will. I'll give them a big hug from your part.
Yes, tell them I'm jealous of you for not being there.
Oh, well, I'll give them a big hug. Maybe that can compensate.
Give them a big hug for me.
Okay. Well, Joe, thank you very much, and I hope you have a very nice day.
Yes, and we'll talk again soon. It's a beautiful day here in California. So it's very nice talking to you.
Meow.
Oh, okay.
Rough.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us on the Blue Frontiers podcast. To learn more about our work and find out how you can support the project, visit blue-frontiers.com or visit our social channels. You can like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at Blue Frontiers, or shoot us a note via our website. If you learned something and enjoyed the show, tell a friend or leave us a positive review on iTunes or wherever you're listening. Don't forget to subscribe to our show and remember to join us for the next episode. See you next time.
Remember that you can also watch the video of this podcast looking for Blue Frontiers Podcast on YouTube.